So for the next couple of weeks, as we head into the resurrection season, we will continue to look at the Sermon on the Mount, but we'll look at two different portions of the sermon. And these two portions we'll talk about in these next couple of weeks involves when Jesus addresses relationships, our relationships with each other. He talks about that. In case you didn't know, our whole life is based off of relationships. As soon as you were born, you were introduced into a relationship with your parents, as well as your siblings, as well as family members and friends. So as soon as you was born, you was introduced into relationships. Oh, look at the little baby. Look at him. Look at her. Grandma got to see him. Auntie got to see him. You was introduced into relationships. And as we continue to grow older, we establish relationship with our friends, our childhood friends as we grow up, our childhood friends in our communities. How many of us are still connected with some of our childhood friends in our community? Maurice? You are? Like, do you still talk to your man today? Do you still talk to your friend today from childhood? Well, that's awesome. But how many of us also, we have lost some along the way? They either passed away, they died, or we had to just cut them off because they was going on a different road. Many of us develop relationships at our schools, in our elementary, junior, high schools, middle high schools, regular high schools, in college, and in our career fields. We develop relationships all throughout our journey in life. God created us to be in a relationship with God and with others. That's why he created us. He created us to be in relationships with God, first of all, and then to be in relationship with each other. That is why God said it is not good for man to be alone, because he didn't create us to be alone. Right? He created us to be in relationships with each other. Right? So that's why one of the worst punishments they can do right now is what? Lock you up. Put you in a room by yourself. Right? Then you go, they try to drive you crazy, right? Because you were not created to be alone. I know a lot of us say, yeah, I just like to be by myself, and it's not. Yeah, you do to a certain extent. You want to go to the grocery store, you want to see people, and that's why so many people struggle during COVID. Because we're created to be in relationships with each other. But there has been times, if we be honest, when relationships have failed and ended up in the worst possible way. Anybody know if a relationship fail and it ends up in the worst possible way? Anybody know what that worst possible way is? What is it? What'd you say? Hate? Death. Exactly. Murder. That's when a relationship has gone total bad, total elevation of hate to the point where someone is murdered. What is murder? The unlawful killing of one human being by another. Now we know that taking someone's life is wrong. We know that, right? We know that. And let's look at what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount about murder. The real meaning of murder. Turn to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, we'll look at verse 21 through 26. When you got it, say, I got it. Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through 26. So just for those who weren't here, the Sermon on the Mount is one of the greatest, if not the greatest sermon preaching or teaching by Jesus. And we have to remember, too, that when Jesus was teaching or preaching this Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was talking directly to his disciples, right? He was talking to his disciples, but it was also was a large crowd standing around just listening. But he was literally talking to his disciples. So, like I remember times when I was young and I was going out and I was about to go out. My mom would always call my friends in the house, whoever was coming to pick me up, and she would talk to all of us, right? Well, she was talking to all of us, but she was really talking to me. Don't be acting a fool. Don't be showing off. Make sure you come back on time. They was there listening, but she was literally just talking to me. And that's the same here in this Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is literally talking to his disciples, to his believers. He was talking to you and he's talking to I, but it's also some other people just around who hear the same thing. So we have to remember that. So Jesus is, when he's talking, when he's preaching this sermon, he's talking about what we're about to talk about today. He's talking to you as a disciple of Christ. He's talking to me as a disciple of Christ. Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. I'm reading from the Message Bible because I like the way the Message Bible breaks it down, but follow me along. It says like this. It says, you are familiar with the command to the ancients. Do not murder. I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with a brother or a sister is guilty of murder. I'm going to read that part again. I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with a brother or sister is guilty of murder. Carelessly calling a brother idiot, and you just might find yourself hauled into court. Thoughtlessly yell stupid at a sister, and you are on the brink of hellfire. The simple moral fact is that words kill. Verse 23 says, this is how I want you to conduct yourselves in these matters. If you enter your place of worship and about to make an offering, you suddenly remember a grudge a friend has against you, abandon your offering, leave immediately, go to this friend and make things right. Then, and only then, come back and work things out with God. Verse 25 says, or say you're out in the street, up at Giant, and an old enemy comes across you. Don't lose a minute. Make the first move. Make things right with him or her. After all, if you leave the first move to them, knowing their track record, you're likely to end up in court, maybe even jail. If that happens, you won't get out without a stiff fine. That's the Message Bible. Let's look at verse 21. Verse 21 is telling us that you have heard and you know the law. You know what God said. You know what the sixth commandment is in Exodus 20:13. You know what that is. What? Thou shalt not kill. You know that. That's what Jesus was telling his disciples. You already know the law. You heard the law. You know what it is. So don't act like you don't know that thou shalt not kill. God's law is given to protect life. That's why he gave that law. Thou shalt not kill. So God can protect life. Life is to be respected and cherished. No life is to be taken. It's not our job. No life is to be taken. Neither one's own life. You can't take your own life, right? Nor someone else's life. So if you even thought about taking your own life, nah, you can't do that. And you definitely can't take someone else's life. verse 22. And I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with his brother or sister is guilty of murder. Carelessly call a brother an idiot or call your sister stupid. You're on the brink of hellfire. And the simple moral fact is that words kill. We know that, right? Verse 22. God is not only telling us not to murder as an outward act, but God is also telling us that murder is also an inward act. We think of murder as just an act on the outside, but it's also on the inside, in our hearts. Some of us are killers and don't even know it. Murder is born within. A person just doesn't walk up to a person and just take their life. No, that thing started on the inside. That thing been percolating on the inside. Then it just reached this point to where it comes on the outside. Murder is born from within, from an uncontrolled spirit, from an unregulated urge, from an inner anger. Anger itself is the real sin. Anger itself is the real sin, the sin that breaks the law of God. Look at your neighbor and say, "Are you angry?" I'm going to scoot on over just a little bit. Anger is bitterness, is rage, is fury. Anger is wanting to strike out against a person, slandering or destroying a person's image, right? You can't tear somebody's image down. You know why? Because that person was created in God's image. So who are you to tear that image down because you're angry? Anger is envy. Anger is desiring to hurt somebody. Killing a person's happiness is anger. Anybody in here ever been angry? Look, yeah. I'm angry right now. Keep on talking. The growth of anger on the inside is dangerous. Unresolved anger will fester. It can become uncontrollable and give birth to murder. So you can be so angry about something that happened 30 years ago, and it's just on the inside, just waiting. Man, when I see that Bama, I'm going to get him. And it's been 30 years. I ain't seen him yet, but I'm still looking for him. I'm still looking for her. Anger with our family members, that thing just boiling on the inside. And that unresolved anger can lead to something that we don't even really want to do. Listen, there are 3 steps in the growth of this unresolved anger. I hope we don't have unresolved anger, but let me just talk to you for a minute. The unresolved anger makes one unhappy. If you're angry about something, whatever it is, it literally makes you unhappy. Makes you miserable, steals your joy, exactly. That anger, that unresolved anger is selfish. It harbors malice. It's that anger that you're just not forgetting. Like, you're not forgetting that this person did this to you. That this person took something from you. This person violated your trust. This person stole something from you. This person let you go. It lingers on. The unresolved anger, it wills revenge and sometimes seeks revenge. Had you ever been so angry that you just like, you want to get revenge? They hurt you, so you want to hurt them back? What'd they say? Hurt people what? Hurt people, hurt people. Unresolved anger. What else? This unresolved anger holds contempt. It despises, it ridicules, right? It arrogantly exalts self and calls another person empty and useless. So because I'm angry at you, I build myself up and say, you're nothing. Try to tear you down. Right? This is the unresolved anger. This unresolved anger arises from pride. It's a proud wrath. Such feelings or anger try to walk over and trample a person, right? You're angry at a person, you just try to just forget them. They fell down, you just walk right by them, you don't pick them up. This unresolved anger, it says that whatever ill happens to that person, whatever bad happens to that person, guess what? They deserve it. They deserve to have the flat tire the way they treated me. They deserve to be evicted. Didn't pay me my money back. That's that unresolved anger. But I know y'all are super saved and sanctified and you've never felt like this. The unresolved anger is that anger that curses. You ever get so angry you just like feel like you got to let it go? I mean, I don't know what it solves, but it makes you, I guess it makes you feel better, right? That little... It seeks, this unresolved anger seeks to destroy an individual and their reputation. Unresolved anger. But there's also a justified anger. The unresolved anger and the justified anger. Now, the justified anger is always disciplined and controlled. It is always limited to those who do wrong either against God or against others. So a justified anger is when, remember who is Christ talking to? His disciples, the believers, those who believe in him. So a justified anger is when one is disciplined and is self-controlled and they're angry or upset because something was done wrong against God or against others. So if you saw someone hijacking the lady walking across the street, snatched her purse or whatever, you have the right to be angry because that person just hurt another person. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes you have the right when people talk about your God in a negative way or say things that are not true about your God and my God in a negative way. Listen, the distinguishing mark between justified anger and unjustified anger is that justified anger is never selfish. It is never about oneself. It is an anger that is purposeful. The believer knows that he or she is angry for a legitimate reason, and he or she seeks to correct the situation in the most peaceful way possible. Are y'all with me? Romans 12:18 says what? If possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So as much as possible, we try to live at peace with everyone. Whether they're right, whether they're wrong or whatever, our job as disciples of Christ is to be the peacemaker, to try to live at peace. John 2:13-16. John chapter 2, 13-16 says this. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Remember this? In the temple courts, Jesus found people what? Selling cattle, sheep, doves, everything, incense, money, tables exchanging, right? So he made a whip out of cords, drove them out of the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins and the money and the changes. He overturned the tables. Sound like Jesus was angry to me. But Jesus, he had to justify anger. He wasn't angry because of something that happened to him. He was angry because what they was doing in the temple, how they was embarrassing God, right? And wasn't using the temple for what it was for. So he got upset. He became angry, right? Justify anger. Anger is cast against many. Too often, hurt feelings exist between those who are supposed to be the closest. A lot of times, anger happens when those the closest to us hurt us. Right? Husband and wives. That's when the anger starts. For whatever reason. A parent and a child. Close relationships. Anger happens. Where else? Between your neighbors, your friends. How many of us have ever had a close friend? I mean, like, this was your girl, this was your man, y'all was close, and all of a sudden, something happened, and y'all became angry at each other. To the point now, y'all don't even speak. That never happened to y'all? Okay. Your employer, employee, you become angry at them. The employer comes, they got the word from the top, they don't have nothing to do with it. The man in the White House said everybody cut, it trickles down and cut, so now your employer got to come to you and say, hey, today is the last day for you. You become angry at the employer and act a fool. The Lord is clear about this matter. We must never allow our anger to take hold of us without just cause. James 1:19 says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be what? Quick to listen, slow to, and slow to become angry. Should be slow to become angry. It's a serious matter to hold feelings against another person. A very, very serious matter to hold feelings against another person. Just imagine you was angry at someone in here. Remember, who is Jesus talking to? Talking to us. So imagine you was angry at somebody last week. For whatever reason. And now you come to church angry. That's a lot of energy to be angry. You come outside, you're like, oh, it's a beautiful day. I can open my window, let the house air out, and you're happy, you come, your car's clean, you're feeling good, you had a good breakfast, and you pull up, and you find a parking space, and then as you see you're about to hit the corner, you got to put on your angry face because somebody crossed you last week, and now you're angry. Now you got to walk in the door. Maurice speaks to you. Hi. Walk up the steps, the greeter speaks and waves, and you gotta be mad. Even though you don't want to be mad, but you angry. And now you see this person on this side of the church, and now you gotta walk all the way over this side and make sure you don't talk to them. You go in the bathroom, he or she happens to get up and go the same time, you see that, you go in the stall and you just close it and wait till they leave. Anger. I wish I was talking to some real people up in here who know what I'm talking about. So let's look at verse 23 and 24. I'm going to move on. How much time I got? Oh, I got a few minutes. 23 and 24, I'm reading from the Message Bible. It says, this is how I want you to conduct yourselves in these matters. Jesus says, when this happens, I want you to act like this. If you enter the place of worship, if you go to Brighter Day and you about to make an offering, put your envelope in the basket, and suddenly you remember a grudge against a friend has you, I need you to turn around and I need you to leave immediately and go find that friend and make things right. Then and only then can you come back to worship. That's heavy. That's heavy right there, God. What are you saying? The answer to anger is reconciliation. The answer to anger is reconciliation. That is the restoring of your relationship, of your friendly relationships. And it's urgent that we reconcile with each other. Like, we can't wait 30 years. We can't wait 30 days. We shouldn't wait 30 minutes. We have to do our part. Reconciliation is always to precede worship. Restoring the relationships with our brothers and sisters, the disciples. Christ is talking to the disciples, especially like with other disciples, especially if you have anger with your other disciples of Christ, other believers, you got to reconcile that immediately. Reconciliation is always to precede worship. Even when you're entering the church to worship, if there is a problem with a brother or sister, we are to turn around from worship and go to that person seeking reconciliation. Yeah, that's it, Pastor. That's why I ain't been to church. I've been trying to reconcile. Oh, I ain't going to come next week. I ain't going to come next week because I got to reconcile. Now, you reconcile and then come on back to worship. That's why even before communion, what do I say? I say if you have something against your brother and sister, you got to go ahead and text them right now and work that out. Reconciliation is the key to defeating anger. But you say, why is reconciliation more important than worship? Reconciliation with God is one of the major reasons and purposes that we come to worship. We come to worship to get back right with God. Like, God, we've been off. Restore our relationship. That's one of the main reasons for worship. We're not just here so our attendance can be on the roll. We're not just here to watch the worship team sing. We're here to restore our relationship with God. A person worships in order to seek reconciliation and fellowship with God and God's people. Listen, a person cannot hope or expect to be right with God if he or she is not right with their brother or sister. How can you expect to be right with God if you're not right with your brother or sister? If you got all this anger and hatred to your brother and sister, whom God loves, whom God died for, whom God raised from the dead for, who is God's child, you got anger and hatred towards that person, but yet you have this great relationship with God. The individual must forgive and be reconciled if he or she expects to be forgiven and reconciled to God. Matthew 6:12, part of the Lord's Prayer says this, and forgive us our debts as we forgive what? Forgive us for our sins and our mistakes that we make as we forgive those who sin against us and make mistakes against us. Matthew 6:14 and 15 says this, for if ye forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also what? Forgive you. But if you forgive not those who trespass against you, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Like, who are we not to forgive somebody because they wrong us? As much as we have wronged God. Y'all got me sweating today. So we have to Forgive each other. Look at your neighbor and say, you got to forgive me. That's funny when couples sit beside each other. Come on. Why else reconciliation is more important than worship? Because a person is to worship, for worship is essential to life and eternity. But worship is unacceptable to God unless a person is reconciled with their brothers or sisters. So you can sit here and sing, you are holy, but God is not hearing you because you are angry with him. So you can do all that. But if you got beef with your brothers and sisters, how can you worship God? It's unacceptable to God unless a person is reconciled with their brother or sister. That's why he says, look, you come into worship to give your offering, but you got beef with the other brothers and sisters. Why else reconciliation is important, is more important than worship? Because bad feelings between believers hinder worship. Come on now, let's think. Although me and Brother Wesley have no problem, so this is an example because he's right here. Okay? But if me and Brother Wesley had problems or bad feelings with each other, like it's going to be super awkward sitting up here with him right beside me every single Sunday. And most time up here when I need something, I always turn to him first. But if we at each other's neck or throat, which we're not, so don't say no stupid stuff, it will be awkward. It will hinder worship. It's like, I love you, Lord, but not him. And I live my Lord, right? So hard feelings, bad feelings between believers hinder worship. Worship is meaningless unless a person is right with his brother or sister. Reconciliation must always precede worship. Lastly, what's the fourth one? Worship is a time for a person to reflect and examine their heart and life to see if there's any wicked within them. So when we come to worship, we're examining our hearts. And if you know you have anger in your heart, you can't skip around that. Because we're examining our whole heart. And I'm talking to the young, I'm talking to the old, I'm talking to my sisters in school, right? You know how the girls be acting in high school, y'all be having anger against them, so y'all know what I'm talking about. Anger against the people on our job, anger against the neighborhood watch, anger against the pastor, anger against the people in the church, right? We got to clear that up. Worship is a time for a person to reflect and examine their hearts and see if there is any wicked way within them. It is essential that the individual search their heart. Worship is not acceptable if bad or wicked feelings against others is within a human heart. It's literally impossible to worship God with all your heart, mind, and soul if you got anger and wickedness in your heart. Like it won't even come out right. You just sit down and whole time and it's like, y'all hurry up and get this over with because you're so angry. Am I talking to real people? So like I said, please don't try to use this as an excuse not to come to worship. I can't come next week because I'm angry, this and that. No. Talk to whoever it is and reconcile and get that done quickly. So whoever you have anger against today, when you leave here, fix that. If you got anger or issues with other believers, some people in here, fix that. If you got anger with me, forget you. No, I'm saying fix that. Fix that. I'm making sure y'all paying attention. I'm making sure y'all still with me. No, if you have anger against me, against anybody in here, you fix that. Because a lot of times it's just miscommunication. Misunderstanding. You ain't speak to me. I ain't even see you. I got contacts dry, I need some more solution. I ain't even see you. Right? The time for reconciliation is while some openness still exists between two parties. So let's say two parties had issues with each other. Like the time to reconcile is right then and there. Not to wait a year, 2 years, 5 years, 30 years. It's like, that's not too late because you're still alive, right? But to reconcile immediately. Reconcile immediately. Come on, we almost done. Verse 25. Verse 25. Verse 25. Let's go to verse 25. What does it say? Sorry, I'm reading this off the top. Verse 25 says, I'm going to read 25 and 26. Or say you're out in the street, right? And an old enemy comes across you. Don't lose a minute. Make the first move. Make things right with him or her. After all, if you leave the move up to them, knowing how their track record is, you're likely to end up in court, maybe even in jail. If that happens, you'll get a stiff fine. So verse 25 is just reminding us, if we have to reconcile with an individual, let's do it quickly. Let's settle matters quickly with your adversary who is trying to take you to the court. You know how it is nowadays, right? It ain't like how it used to be. You had problems with somebody, y'all do whatever, y'all slap box, get it over with, become friends. Now, you have problems with somebody now, y'all get angry. What everybody gonna do? I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna take you to court. Oh, I'm filing these child support papers. Guys, telling you this. I heard it from the OGs back in the day, but it is so true. It is cheaper to keep her. When I got married, the old deacon in church said, if you want your marriage to last, it's 2 words you need is it. Learn. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. That will get you a long ways. So you got to settle matters quickly because they're trying to take you to court. Do it while you're still together. I'm talking about not just that. I'm talking about even in your neighborhood relationships. Right? I'm going to talk about this because my neighbor probably not watching. But we got a dog, right? You know Amos, right? Amos. He's hyper, he's active, right? He's fun-loving. Pit bull, don't take no stuff, but he's loving, right? So one night, he just happened to jump over the fence. Him and the other dog got down into it, and Amos came out on top. And the dog had to have one of his legs amputated. Yeah, so you know the neighbor was hot. All of a sudden, they go give the dog the royal treatment, had all these surgeries and all this medicine and all this stuff. So it's this huge doctor bill talking about, we had to spend $23,000 on that. I'm sorry. Right? Like, I ain't paying that, right? So I had to make amends with the neighbor because they was about to be on some suing type stuff. Like they was ready to take us to court. I had to admit that we were in the wrong, right? But the thing is, you have to make amends quickly while it's open. Even though it's hard, that was a hard conversation I had because the wife, she had seen everything that happened. The husband was mad because she was mad. We had just started a good relationship, but that relationship kind of just ended. But I had to go to them and make amends, or we was going to court. And I believe because I went and made amends, me and my wife, we apologized. We helped a little bit with the bill, right? I think that helped the situation. Man, they still don't speak to us now. What? Like 2 years, like they literally don't speak to us. Like, drive down the street and they see us out there. I get it though. Like, I get it. Well, but Amos still a part of the family, you know what I mean? You know, some people thought we should have laid them down, but I'm like, nah, you know what I mean? If one of our children make a mistake, we don't just get rid of them. You deal with it, right? Even though you're angry at the dog or angry at the child. But what I'm saying is, when you have matters, you settle it quickly so they won't take you to court. Matters in your relationships with your spouse, settle it quickly so it won't go to court. Matters with your brothers and sisters, settle it quickly so it won't go to court. Are you with me? And especially with believers. Like believers, disciples of Christ, we should not be suing each other, taking each other to court. Why are we taking each other to court? Why are we going to these unbelievers to settle a problem between us as believers? We sit down, we talk about it, whatever the problem is. Okay, I accidentally opened the car door and hit your car and your insurance didn't pay for it. They know that's my fault. Let me pay for it. Oh, I'm taking you to court. For what? More money? Yeah, that's not right. So remember, Jesus is talking to who? The disciples, the believers. So if we as believers have problems, we have to settle it amongst ourselves. No need for us to be going to court, right? That's part of the earthly danger when you don't settle issues quickly. Various can lead us to serious action, ranging from lawsuits to imprisonment. Especially against the believers. I'm talking to the believers. This is not good for the believers. It's not good for God. Two believers at the point where we're arguing and we hate each other and anger so much that we got to go to court. How does that make God look? How does that make us as disciples of Christ or believers look? Y'all can't even settle your own problems among yourselves. And this is what Jesus was talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. As we close, the danger of anger is manifold. Anger leads to barriers in relationship. Anger, unresolved anger hurts families. Don't raise your hand on this. How many of our families are not as close as they was because of anger? Because aunt such and such got mad with cousin such and such, aunt such and such mad with aunt such and such, uncle such and such mad with nephew. Like, come on. So now we go to the family function and there's tension. Anger hurts families. Anger is costly. It can cost you. Anger, it damages the name of Christ. And it damages your own testimony. You get super angry and act a certain way, people are like, oh, first thing they say, oh, I thought you was a Christian. That's the first thing they say. Yeah, I am, but it's too late. Right? Anger. It says to the unbelievers that Christianity stuff, that Jesus stuff ain't real. Because you so angry, you out of yourself, right? You acting, and you angry at another believer. Why do we do that? We get angry we get angry at another believer, and then we go on the phone and talk to a non-believer. Now we're making all of us look bad. Anger. Anger takes advantage of another person. Anger can cause injustice to be done. Then we want to go to the courts and go to the laws. And we know that the laws is not always right, right? Anger can cause a weaker brother or sister to turn away from the faith. People talk about church hurt and stuff like that. They got angry about something. We didn't solve that, whatever that issue was, quickly before they turned away. Anger, as you know, can cause fights. Anger can cause wars. Anger can cause suffering. And anger could cause death. Murder. There is an eternal danger. Life does not last always. And the day of final judgment is coming. A person's judgment for holding a grudge against a brother or sister will be severe. Imagine going, you stand before God and you're like, oh, I'm in here. I did everything. I believed in this and that. And God says to you, what about that anger against such and such? You died with that anger in your heart. You died with that anger in your heart towards an individual. And you know when you stand before God, God sees everything. So that's why I'm saying that whatever anger that we may have, if we have any, we must resolve it quickly because we don't know when our time is up here on this earth. So we must do that. Reconciliation should be sought after quickly. Right now before judgment. Right now. Tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So we must reconcile with our brothers and sisters ASAP. We should not be holding any anger or bitterness toward anyone, no matter how they may have wronged us. We should not have any hatred in our heart, which could lead to murder. Why? Because we need each other to survive. I need you. You need me. We're all what? Part of God's family. So we need each other. But you say, Pastor, I hear you, and we gone now. I tried to reconcile with this person. I tried, Pastor. I called him. I called her. I wrote a letter. I sent a card. I text. I emailed. I tried. But they just keep avoiding me. What do I do? Then you make sure that you have done everything you can do to reconcile that relationship. You called, you went by their house, you sent them flowers, you did everything you could do. And if they do not respond or allow you an opportunity to reconcile with them because they're just avoiding you and all that stuff, I'm talking about believers now. And I'm talking about unbelievers, but mainly believers, right? You reconcile with them. If you still can't do that, then you pray for them. You pray that God will soften their heart, right? Pray for yourself first. Make sure your heart is right. God, did I do everything that I could have done to reconcile the relationship? If not, please show me. And if God says you've done everything, then you pray for the other individual that their heart will be softened. And then you pray and ask God, God, please make an opportunity available when I can come cross paths with him or her. And then when that happens, because if I had it happen to me, and it happened at the darndest times, like you weren't even ready, right? You thinking it's going to happen in a nice, it happens at the craziest moment when you're in a rush at the gas station and you're like, I'm already late, but there he is. You ask God to provide the opportunity for you, and when the opportunity comes, you got to take advantage of it quickly because it's right there. And you got to reconcile with that individual. And if they don't receive it, then you've done your part. But we're responsible for ourselves. Brothers and sisters, I hope this has been a blessing to you. Touching on a sensitive subject, anger, which can lead to murder. But Jesus addressed the disciples. He was talking to his disciples then and there. So if it was an issue for them, their anger and their issues, we know there's an issue for some of us. So we praise God for talking about relationships in this Sermon on the Mount. Amen? Amen.